January 30th, 1933. On this night, the fate of the German nation shifted irrevocably. Adolf Hitler claimed the chancellery. Democracy vanished under the iron heel of the new regime. Behind the dictator stood a massive paramilitary force. 3 million men. The SA, the Brownshirts. The footage shows endless columns of torches illuminating the Brandenburg Gate. These stormtroopers used street violence to clear Hitler's path. They were the muscle of the revolution. But power does not share. Why did the leadership turn on its own? The SA demanded a second revolution. They threatened the established order. The solution was absolute, a massacre. The night of the long knives, victims fell by the hundred. Among them was Karl Ernst. At first glance, a loyal Nazi commander, but in reality, a target to be erased. Ernst rose from the bottom. He went from nightclub bouncer to power broker. He believed his position was secure. There was no mistake. The system he helped create sentenced him to death. A hail of bullets ended his rise. His story began in September 1st, 1904. On this date, Karl Ernst was born into the soot and noise of Berlin's working-class districts. He emerged from the ruins of Imperial Germany with empty pockets. He had nothing but ambition. His father was a man of violence. A former cavalryman, he survived the trenches of the Great War only to sell his skills to the highest bidder. He became a hired bodyguard for Friedrich Flick. This was one of Germany's most notorious industrialists, a man whose factories churned out steel for the war machine. Young Ernst watched and learned. Violence was a currency. His education ended early. He left elementary school and tried to fit into a normal life. Between 1918 and 1921, he scraped through a commercial apprenticeship. He learned the export trade. He filed papers. But the silence of an office could not contain his hunger. Ernst drifted through the city. He worked as a hotel bellboy. He worked as a clerk. Then, he found a place in the shadows. He took a job as a bouncer at a gay nightclub in Berlin's underground scene. Archive photos show the atmosphere: heavy smoke, dim lights, and the decadent elite of the Weimar Republic. Ernst stood at the door. He watched. This detail would later become ammunition for his enemies. Whispers about his private life haunted him until the day of his execution. 1923. The German economy collapsed. Hyperinflation turned money into worthless paper. Political chaos consumed the streets. Why did a former bouncer join a political army? It wasn't just ideology. It was a chance to inflict pain without consequence. Ernst found his true calling. He joined the Sturmabteilung, the SA. This was Hitler's paramilitary terror force. The group rose from the ashes of the Freikorps. These were independent bands of bitter veterans who refused to accept the surrender of 1918. By 1921, roughly 400,000 men had joined these ranks. They channeled their rage into street battles. They beat communists. They hunted anyone blamed for Germany's collapse. At first glance, a gymnastics club, but in reality, a private army. In Bavaria, they initially hid behind the name Gymnastics and Sports Division. But there were no games here. They put on distinctive brown shirts. It became a uniform of intimidation. Their mission was crystal clear: protect Adolf Hitler, crush opposition parties. They did not use arguments. They used fists. They used clubs. Eventually, they used bullets. The SA prepared for a major strike. November 8, 1923. Hitler led his brown shirts into a Munich beer hall. He fired a shot into the ceiling. He declared a revolution. They marched to overthrow the government, but the operation ended in catastrophic failure. Police lines held firm. Gunfire erupted. The coup collapsed on the pavement. 16 dead stormtroopers. That was the immediate cost of the attempt to overthrow the German government. Munich police did not hesitate. They met the Nazi insurgents with a wall of gunfire. The street filled with smoke and the sound of cracking rifles. It was chaotic. Bodies hit the pavement. Alongside the 16 insurgents, 4 police officers died in the exchange. Hitler did not escape the dragnet. Police arrested him. The charge was high treason. The court sentenced him to 5 years in prison. Why was the sentence so light? The judges were sympathetic. and the enforcement was even weaker. He served barely 8 months. Political pressure pried the cell doors open. He walked out free. But this was only the beginning. By February 1925, Hitler had already reconstituted the SA. It did not just return, it spread across Germany like an infection. In 1926, 6,000 stormtroopers marched at Weimar. The columns were thin, but the potential was visible. At first glance, a small political club. But in reality, a paramilitary engine waiting for fuel. That fuel was the Great Depression. The economy collapsed, unemployment soared, desperate men flooded the streets. The SA offered them a purpose, a uniform, and a hot meal. The recruitment centers were overwhelmed. By 1930, membership exploded to 60,000. The footage from this era shows endless lines of young men raising their arms in salute. Their faces are hard. The numbers climbed vertically. January 1931, 77,000 members. November 1931, 221,000. August 1932, 445,000. Events accelerated. By April 1934, Hitler had claimed the chancellorship. The SA roster numbered a staggering 3 million men. They completely dwarfed Germany's professional military. The regular army was outnumbered. Karl Ernst rode this violent wave upward. From 1927 to March 1931, he worked at the Supreme SA Leadership Headquarters in Munich. It was desk work. But his true opportunity came during the Stennis Revolt. This was an internal rebellion in Berlin, a mutiny. When the dust settled, the Loyalists won. Ernst was promoted to adjutant of the Berlin SA in April 1931. He simultaneously joined the Nazi Party. Documents record his specific membership number, 456153. As adjutant, Ernst became essential. He was now the right-hand man to Wolf Heinrich Graf von Helldorf, the commander of the Berlin Stormtroopers. They worked fast. September 12, 1931. It was the evening of the Jewish New Year. Families gathered to celebrate. But outside, the stormtroopers were gathering too. Ernst and Helldorf finalized their orders. They orchestrated a plan that would turn the holiday into a nightmare. 1,000 stormtroopers. That was the force that descended on Berlin in a single wave. They flooded the Kurfürstendamm, the city's most elegant boulevard. It was a calculated orchestration of terror. The target was specific: Jews leaving the synagogue and any pedestrian who looked like an enemy. The scene turned into a hunt. The mob did not just shout. They screamed, "Jews die," and beat the Jews dead. They chased civilians into cafes and down side streets. They used batons and boots. The brutality was public, loud, and unchecked. Police eventually stepped in. Authorities charged Count Helldorf and Karl Ernst with a breach of the peace. Initially, the two leaders went underground. They hid from the warrants, but they soon resurfaced with a high-powered defense team. Their lawyers were Roland Freisler and Hans Frank, men who would later become the Third Reich's most notorious executioners. Why did the legal system fail? It seemed the courts still functioned, but the judiciary was already rotting from within. In November 1931, both men received 6-month prison sentences. It looked like justice. But by February 1932, the conviction was overturned. Ernst simply paid a fine. He walked out of the courtroom a free man. But this was only the beginning. The SA under Ernst Röhm was evolving. Röhm, a scarred veteran of the First World War, had grand ambitions. He wasn't building a political club. He was building a replacement for the German army, a quasi-military force with millions of members. However, Röhm carried a fatal vulnerability: his open homosexuality. In 1931, social democratic newspapers obtained private letters. In them, Röhm described himself as same-sex oriented. The publication triggered a massive scandal within the Nazi ranks. It wasn't just Röhm. Many SA leaders shared his orientation. This included his deputy, Edmund Heines, and the newly emboldened Karl Ernst. The camera records, the swagger of the Brownshirts in Berlin. But behind the uniforms, rumors swirled. Ernst's relationship with Paul Röhrbein became the talk of the city. Röhrbein was a wealthy friend of Röhm, not even a party member, yet he held influence. Critics weaponized this connection. They mockingly called Karl Ernst Frau von Röhrbein, Mrs. Röhrbein. The insinuation was clear. They alleged Ernst had slept his way to power. At first glance, a hierarchy of soldiers, but in reality, a clique defined by desire. Enemies called it the Röhm-Röhrbein-Ernst Triple Alliance. They characterized it as a homosexual mafia controlling the Berlin Stormtroopers. Resentment grew among the rank and file. On June 26, 1931, the tension snapped. A Nazi named Walter Bergmann stepped forward and confronted the faction directly. A public screaming match broke the silence of a Berlin pub. The accuser stood front and center, confronting Karl Ernst and Röhrbein. He pointed a finger. He shouted. He called them parasites on the party. He called them male prostitutes. He called them sodomizers who were dragging the party's reputation straight to hell. The patrons froze. Ernst stood up. He swore on his honor that he was not homosexual. He denied every allegation. But the whispers did not stop. They only grew louder. Rumors placed Ernst on a luxury yacht. The owner was Erich Hanussen, a Jewish mystic, a con artist. Hanussen poured massive sums of money into the pockets of high-ranking Nazis. Champagne flowed. Orgies were alleged. Hanussen believed his financial generosity bought him safety. At first glance, a generous friendship. But in reality, a transaction destined for blood. Hanussen's money would not save him. The favors meant nothing. In 1933, Ernst repaid the debt with violence. He participated in Hanussen's murder. It was a cold, grim betrayal. A body found in the woods. A problem silenced. But this was only the beginning. Ernst's career accelerated rapidly. By December 1931, he took command of the reorganized SA Group Berlin-Brandenburg. He started as a staff leader. Then he became the adjutant. His rank, SA Oberführer. Why was his rise so fast? Was it merit? No, it was ruthless ambition. From July 1932 to March 1933, he led the Berlin East subgroup. Then came a major promotion. March 1st, 1933, he was named SA Gruppenführer. Only 2 weeks later, by March 15th, he replaced Count Helldorf. Ernst now commanded all SA forces in Berlin and Brandenburg. He controlled every stormtrooper in the German capital. The streets belonged to him. Ernst also wore a suit. Between July 1932 and November 1933, he was elected to the Reichstag multiple times. He represented Berlin. In August 1933, Hermann Göring made a move. He appointed Ernst to the prestigious Prussian State Council. Power was consolidating. Then came the fire. February 27, 1933. Night fell over Berlin. Suddenly, the sky turned orange. Flames consumed the Parliament building. The Reichstag was burning. Beams collapsed. Glass shattered. The Nazis wasted no time. They immediately blamed the communists. They claimed a violent revolution was underway. Hitler seized the crisis. He pushed through the Reichstag Fire decree. The footage shows police trucks filling the streets. The decree was formally called the Law for the Protection of the People and State. It obliterated constitutional rights. Freedom of assembly, gone. Freedom of speech, destroyed. The press, silenced. Police could arrest anyone without cause. This document paved the legal road to a Nazi dictatorship. But who lit the match? Suspicion fell heavily on Karl Ernst. Some historians reconstructed a specific timeline. They believe Ernst led a small SA squad underground. They moved through heating tunnels from the Reichstag President's Palace directly into the Parliament building. They set the blaze and vanished. The archives contain diagrams of the underground passages linking the buildings. However, the consensus among historians points elsewhere. They argue that Marinus van der Lubbe acted alone, a Dutch communist, mentally unstable. The arsonist was found at the scene, shirtless and confused. Regardless of the culprit, the result was the same. Democracy died in the ashes. By 1934, the SA had become a massive political force. 3 million men. That was the sheer weight of the Sturmabteilung, the SA. They were not just a political liability. They were a loaded weapon pointed at the state. By 1934, the Brownshirts outnumbered the Reichswehr, Germany's professional army, by a massive margin. Their leader, Ernst Röhm, was no longer satisfied with street brawls. He demanded the regular army be absorbed into the SA, with himself as supreme commander. Why did the situation become critical? Röhm was Hitler's oldest ally, but the army was the key to global power. Hitler had to choose between the mob and the military. The SA's behavior made the choice easier. Their reputation was toxic. Drunken violence in the streets, open homosexuality scandals. It embarrassed Hitler during sensitive negotiations with conservative elites. The pressure mounted from the top. President Paul von Hindenburg and Vice-Chancellor Franz von Papen issued a cold warning. Control the revolutionary elements or face a military coup. The threat of martial law hung over Berlin. At first glance, a dispute between political factions, but in reality, a fight for survival. Heinrich Himmler and Reinhard Heydrich saw an opening. The leaders of the SS, the smaller rival to the SA, began to weave a net. In April 1934, they conspired with Hermann Göring. They needed a pretext for murder. They fabricated evidence claiming Röhm had accepted 12 million Reichsmarks from France to overthrow the regime. That is $60 million today. The dossier was a lie, but it was effective. On June 24th, SS officers viewed the falsified documents. They were told an SA coup was imminent. Events accelerated. Hitler authorized the purge. Himmler, Heydrich, and Göring compiled the death lists. They added names, crossed them out, and added them again. Targets included SA leadership and anyone who had ever crossed the Nazis. The operation was codenamed Hummingbird. The world would know it as the Night of the Long Knives. On June 28th, the trap snapped shut. Hitler ordered Röhm to summon all top SA leaders to Bad WC, a quiet Bavarian spa resort. They believed they were attending a conference. They were walking into a kill zone. On the morning of June 30th, silence broke. SS units commanded by Theodor Eicke, the commandant of Dachau concentration camp, breached the hotel. They did not knock. They kicked down doors and dragged officers from their beds. Röhm was arrested in his room. The prisoners were thrown into trucks and transported to Stadelheim prison in Munich. The footage from the era shows heavy trucks speeding through Bavarian roads, tense faces of SS guards. The execution squads were already waiting in the prison courtyard. Most of the SA leadership was shot immediately. The sound of gunfire echoed off the brick walls. But Hitler hesitated regarding Röhm. For hours, the dictator wavered over the fate of his old comrade. Finally, on July 1st, the order came. Eicke entered Röhm's cell. He placed a pistol on the table. He gave the prisoner 10 minutes to commit suicide. Röhm refused. He stood bare-chested and demanded Hitler kill him personally. Eicke did not wait. He raised his weapon and shot Röhm dead at point-blank range. Evidence suggests Röhm remained loyal to the end. Nazi propaganda later claimed he died shouting insults. But this was only the beginning. The SS murdered SA leaders nationwide. Simultaneously, they eliminated other political enemies. General Kurt von Schleicher, Hitler's predecessor as chancellor, was at home with his wife. The assassins rang the doorbell and gunned them both down. Conservative critics, right-wing nationalists, former allies deemed disloyal. The lists were thorough. The camera records, bullet holes in plaster walls, bodies covered by white sheets on the pavement. Between June 30th and July 6th, the machinery of death did not stop. At least 90 people were killed. Other estimates reached 200 or more. The message was absolute. There was no law. There was only the will of the Führer. Karl Ernst's turn came swiftly. June 30th, 1934. A day meant for celebration turned into a trap. Karl Ernst stood at the docks in Bremerhaven, tickets to Madeira in his hand. It was supposed to be a honeymoon. His new bride stood beside him. His friend Martin Kirschbaum, the man who financed the voyage, checked the luggage. The mood was light, but the order had already left Berlin. An arrest warrant arrived by wire. The holiday ended before the ship even left the port. Ernst was not asked to surrender. He was seized instantly. Blows rained down on him at the harbor. He was handed over like cargo to an SS commando unit. The leader was Kurt Gildisch, a man from Hitler's inner protection circle. Gildisch's men did not hold back. They interrogated Ernst with fists and boots. A special plane waited on the tarmac. They flew the prisoner straight to Berlin, landing at Tempelhof Airport. From the runway, he was dragged to the SS barracks, 9:37 a.m. That was the time stamped on the death certificate. At 29 years old, Ernst stood against a wall. Facing him were men of the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, the elite, the Führer's own guards. But the propaganda machine moved faster than the bullets. Radio broadcasts across Germany announced his execution hours before the trigger was pulled. The script was written before the man was dead. Why did Ernst salute his executioners? He did not beg. He did not curse. He believed this was a right-wing coup against Hitler. He thought he was dying to protect the regime. The footage shows Ernst raises his arm stiffly. He shouts, "Heil Hitler!" The volley cuts him down. He died loyal to the man who signed his death warrant. Rumors spread that his wife died with him. But this was false. She spent 2 weeks in protective custody. On July the 14th, 1934, the gates opened. She returned to Berlin. She lived there quietly until 1982. Events accelerated. Events. July 13th. The Reichstag gathered. Hitler took the podium. He did not apologize. He justified the blood. He called Röhm and Schleicher traitors in the pay of France. At first glance, a political speech. But in reality, a declaration of absolute lawlessness. Hitler claimed to be the supreme judge of the German people. The parliament nodded. They passed a law retroactively making every murder legal. State policy was now simple: survival through elimination. August 1st, 1934. President Hindenburg lay dying. Hitler did not wait for the final breath. His cabinet passed a new law. It stated a simple condition: upon Hindenburg's death, the office of president would cease to exist. It would merge with the chancellor. One title remained: Führer. 9 a.m., August 2nd. The 87-year-old field marshal died at his estate in East Prussia. The last barrier was gone. Within hours, the announcement came. Hitler was now the absolute ruler of Germany. The army was next. Soldiers gathered in barracks across the nation. They did not swear to the Constitution. They did not swear to Germany. They swore unconditional obedience to one man: Adolf Hitler. August 19th. A referendum rubber-stamped the coup. Karl Ernst was forgotten. No one mourned the thug who died shouting for his killer. The night of the long knives stripped the mask from the regime. Loyalty was a currency that had lost its value. Hitler used the SA to beat Germany into submission. Then he used the SS to butcher the SA. Thus ended the illusion of safety.